Good afternoon. My name is Ken Spencer. I'm the Regional Director from North Carolina in the U.S., and I'm excited to be at TechEd talking about ADO.NET 2.0 and some of the great things they've done with the new dataset architecture. So what we're going to do is drill into the dataset very quickly, dispense with all the marketing fluff, and really talk about some of the new technology and what it's going to mean to our applications. So at this point, you've seen my entire slideshow, so we're just going to kill PowerPoint and immediately move to VisualStudio.net. Some of the interesting things that they've done before we get started is Microsoft has dramatically enhanced the performance of the data set. So this will be important to you as you start building applications, especially when you're doing inserts and updates. They have also changed the tables now in a data set so that you can actually serialize data tables. So it makes it very easy to set up a single table now, pass it around throughout your application across web services or whatever. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So let's take a look at some of the newest features that are really exciting. First, let's take a look at the new Dataset Designer. Now you will see on the screen the Dataset Designer inside of Visual Studio. You can get to this designer from several ways. You can first create a new data set and just open the data set, or you can go in and create a new data source with this data sources window you see on the left. You basically click and select the data source and it goes off and builds a data set for you automatically. Now, a couple things you should know is the data sources window at this point in Beta 2 only shows up in a WinForms application. So if you're building an application that's a web application, create a class library, create your data sets there, then you still get to the data sources window and everything. However, you could still build data sets and use the Dataset Designer in any type of application, whether a web or a Windows application. Now, a couple things to note. One, this Dataset Designer is a dataset designer. It is not any kind of XML or XSD or any other kind of designer, so it is very powerful. This makes it very intriguing to use now because it understands data sets and data sets only. As you can see, it looks like a normal property window here with a design surface. Now, as I go in and look at this data table, there's several things that are interesting as I move around it. First, if you were to click on a property in this data table that represents a column, you'll see in our properties window all the various properties. And one of these things is very interesting. For instance, with a data set, one of the problems we have is if you try to return null values, what's going to happen? You're actually going to get back an error, right? Now, you just go into the properties window, click, and then select the type of exception you want, whether you just want an empty string back, you want nothing back, or you want it to throw an exception, which is default. You can also select several columns and make this change for all of them at once. So this makes it very easy to go in and configure your data set. You can also go in and change a lot of other properties, so you can get to the caption and other things directly here. Now, as I said, this is the tip of the iceberg. Let's look at some of the other things that are really powerful that are totally new. When you create a data set now, it will automatically generate what's called a table adapter for each table in that data set. Now, let's look at this example. You can see here that we have this customer's table adapter hanging off this table, and we have all these fill things. These are actually methods that are implemented automatically inside the dataset class for you. For instance, we see fill and sort by company, which intuitively you would think that's going to actually fill the data set and set it by a field called company. There's another one that says fill by customer ID. These are also going to fill the data set, but are going to fill it now based on a single customer ID. Now, what's cool about this is you can go in and do all the work you need to set this up directly in this designer. For instance, if I want to go in and edit this, I can go in and simply drop in here and configure the data table using one of the wizards. And you see the wizard pop up. And here's the SQL statement. If I were to go into Query Builder, I have complete access to it. And I also have the ability not only to populate the data table from these types of SQL statements, but also from store procedures, from business objects, and so I really can populate them and construct them in any way that I want. Now, these wizards that you'll find inside of the data set designer and also the data source editor are reentrant wizards. So that means, as you can see here, we just brought the wizard up. It already knows the query that we have. It lets us go into Query Builder and configure it. We can move around and change the method names. We can simply step through it and eventually end up canceling out and stopping the whole process. So you can see we can easily go in and reconfigure things. We can also go in and do things like add a new query directly. For instance, if we wanted to create a new store procedure, this is really exciting because now you simply go in, select the type of store procedure. Notice we can not only do selects, but also do updates and inserts and so forth. We step through the process, go right back into the Query Builder, add our where clause if we wanted to. And you can see I just changed this SQL statement. We continue to step through, finish, and at this point we've gone through and completely configured this query. So it makes it very easy for us to go out and actually do these types of operations. Now if you notice that arrow popped up, this is beta 2 code, so once in a while you're going to see those types of arrows pop up. Now as you can see, we've got a fill method here called fill by customer ID. Well, fill by customer ID takes the customer ID and populates the data set. So how would we use this fill method? Because we're not used to having data tables that we have procedures hanging off of. So we need to really understand how this plumbing is set up for us. So let's actually take a look at the code and drill into where we actually populate this data set using this. So if I flip back over to Visual Studio, I'm actually going to move into a customers class now. And I've set this up a little earlier. And the customers class, as you can see, is pretty simple. And all it does is it creates an instance of something called a table adapter. And in this case, I referenced something called the Northwind Dataset Table Adapters, and I asked for the Customers Table Adapter. Now that Customer Table Adapters class inside of the Dataset Table Adapters class was automatically set up for me. I didn't have to do anything. When I built the dataset, it just created it for me automatically. All I did was add this method called Fill and Sort by Company, which you saw in the designer. And now you can see that we pass in the data table that we want to actually modify. We call this method, and that's it. As soon as we do that, we're going to run the application a second, and you'll see it actually populate from that. We have another example where we have the customer ID method. So in this case, fill by customer ID, we take in a customer ID property, and we actually take an instance of this same class, again, the table adapters class. We pass in now the data table and the customer ID value. So let's run this application, see what this looks like. Oh, it's complaining about our build arrows. Let's see. That's because I got too quick with my fingers here. Build arrows are normal nicely, now I can go in and fix these quickly. Let's go in and first populate this by calling the first method and looking at all the data, which is what we typically get back when we do some type of automated operation. But now we can go in and actually type in, let's say, a customer ID, click this button, and actually generate a single row back. And you saw that to do both of these operations, in the code base, we have a total of 4 lines of actual functional code. There's a dimension statement and then a call to the underlying class's method. If you look at the form, we simply call the methods on the business objects and pass in whatever value we're going to pass in. So it's a very simple and easy to use process. The interesting thing about this, I think, is if you look at this carefully, you'll see that because of the new binding options we have, because of the way the table adapters are set up, you can actually use the new data sets and data tables and not have to create a separate data layer in your applications now, because this builds it for you automatically. So now your business objects, when you create the data set, your data layer is done, it's built, it's over. So this is just a very small example of some of the flexibility of this great new technology. I think this is one of the most exciting releases of .NET I've seen. One of the reasons for that, if you think about it, it's not 2.0, it is .NET 3.0, because it is the third release on the .NET framework. And now Microsoft can add a lot of killer functionality, as we've seen here. As I said, this is the tip of the iceberg. You need to dig in and explore this, and you will be amazed at the things you'll discover. Thanks again, and great luck with 2.0.